When a flight attendant refuses to let a nurse sit in business class, she has no idea that the woman she's mistreating owns the entire airline. What happens next shocks everyone on the plane. This powerful story is a lesson about judging others too quickly and the importance of treating everyone with respect. Like, share, and comment if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect. The flight attendant returned with a supervisor, a middle-aged man with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. He glanced at Claire, then at her ticket, then at the attendant. "Ma'am, there seems to be some confusion," he said, smoothly, but there was something in his tone, like he had already decided Claire didn't belong there. "Business class is reserved for our frequent flyers, corporate travelers, and those who qualify for an upgrade." Claire's fingers curled around the armrest of the nearest seat. "I bought this seat." She's keeping her voice steady. "I paid for it, just like everyone else here." The attendant scoffed under her breath, just enough for Claire to catch it. "People try to sneak up here all the time," she muttered. Claire felt her stomach twist. She wasn't stupid. She knew what was happening. She wasn't dressed like the other passengers in business class. No designer bags. No tailored suit, just a simple, comfortable outfit because after weeks of standing on her feet for 14-hour shifts, she valued comfort over fashion. But that didn't mean she was less. The supervisor sighed, clearly annoyed. "Ma'am, I'll ask you one more time to take your seat in economy or we'll have to involve security." A few passengers were watching now, some whispering, others looking away, pretending they didn't notice. Claire exhaled, slow and measured. She could feel the weight of the stairs pressing down on her, but she wasn't going to back down. "That won't be necessary," she said, reaching into her bag. "Let me make a call." She pulled out her phone and dialed a number, her expression unreadable. The supervisor's face twitched with irritation. "Ma'am, you cannot make calls right now. Please put your phone." "Hello? Yes, I need to speak to Mark immediately," Claire said into the phone, ignoring him. Her voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it. "It's urgent." The supervisor huffed, crossing his arms, while the flight attendant looked smug, as if she had won. Then Claire said something that made them freeze. "Tell him it's Claire Reynolds." The businessman nearby shifted in his seat. A woman across the aisle leaned in slightly. The air in the cabin changed. There was something about the way she said it, like her name carried weight, like it mattered. The supervisor frowned. "Who exactly are you calling?" Claire didn't answer. She just waited. And within seconds, the phone call changed everything. The moment Claire said her name, the shift was almost instant. The supervisor's face twitched, his confidence wavering just a little. The flight attendant still had her arms crossed, her smirk barely fading. But the businessman who had been half listening suddenly sat up straighter. He knew that name. A few others exchanged glances, some pulling out their phones as if trying to place where they had heard it before. Then the call connected. "Claire?" A deep, authoritative voice filled the silence. It was loud enough that even those closest to her could hear it. "Mark," Claire said, her tone cool, "I'm on flight 227, and there's been an issue with seating." The supervisor cleared his throat, shifting his stance. "Ma'am, this really isn't necessary. I was just informed that my business class seat doesn't belong to me," Claire continued, ignoring him. "Apparently, I don't look like I belong here." Silence. A dangerous kind. Then Mark's voice hardened. "Put the supervisor on the phone. Now." Claire held the phone out, her expression unreadable. The supervisor hesitated before reluctantly taking it. Hello?" The pause was short, but whatever Mark said on the other end made the man's face drain of color. He swallowed hard, nodding slightly as if Mark could see him. "Yes, sir. Of course. I understand." His eyes darted to Claire, then to the flight attendant, whose smirk was now gone. Another moment passed and the supervisor's posture completely changed. Shoulders squared, voice suddenly dripping with forced politeness. "I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding, Miss Reynolds." He handed the phone back to her, his fingers stiff. "Please take your seat. There will be no further issues." The flight attendant looked confused. "Sir?" "What?" But she never got to finish. Mark's voice came through the phone again, quieter this time, but still sharp. "I'll be handling this personally." Claire ended the call and slipped her phone back into her bag. The supervisor took a step back, gesturing stiffly for her to sit. But before she did, she turned to the flight attendant. I hope you remember this moment, she said softly. Because I do. The woman's face paled. Claire sat down, tension thick in the air. The other passengers who had been watching quickly looked away, pretending to mind their own business, but the businessman nearby couldn't help himself. Excuse me, he said hesitantly. I have to ask, who exactly are you? Claire adjusted her seatbelt, then looked at him with a small, knowing smile. I own the airline. The businessman's eyes widened. A few passengers nearby stiffened, their curiosity getting the best of them. The flight attendant looked like she had been struck by lightning. You own the airline? The businessman repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire nodded casually, adjusting in her seat like she had just stated something as simple as the weather. That's right. The supervisor's face was covered in an uneasy smile, beads of sweat forming at his temple. The flight attendant, who had spent the last 10 minutes looking at Claire like she was a stain on the leather seats, suddenly couldn't meet her eyes. Claire could feel the energy shift around her, but she didn't gloat. She had learned long ago that power was about how loud you were. It was about how you carried yourself when people underestimated you. The businessman finally let out a stung chuckle. I thought your name sounded familiar. Claire Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Aviation. Now the murmur started. A few gasped, a couple of people pulling out their phones, either Googling her name or texting someone about what they had just witnessed. The flight attendant looked panicked now, her mind clearly racing for a way out of this mess. I had no idea, she stammered. Miss Reynolds? I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. Claire turned her gaze to her, expression calm but unwavering. No, you're not. The woman flinched. You weren't sorry when you assumed I didn't belong here, Claire continued. You weren't sorry when you smirked while I was being questioned, and you certainly weren't sorry when you spoke to me like I was lying about my own ticket. The flight attendant opened her mouth, but no words came out. Claire exhaled slowly, then turned to the supervisor. What's your name? He straightened up, trying to compose himself. Michael? Ma'am? Well, Michael, she said, her voice steady, I'd like a full report on this incident. I want to know how often things like this happen. I want names, I want patterns, and I want to know exactly how many paying customers have been treated like this just because they didn't look the part. Michael swallowed hard and nodded quickly. Understood, Ms. Reynolds. Claire leaned back in her seat, finally feeling comfortable. She wasn't here to humiliate anyone. She just wanted people like that flight attendant to think twice before treating someone unfairly again. The businessman shook his head in amazement. I bet she'll think twice before judging someone by their clothes again. Claire smiled slightly, gazing out the window as the plane prepared for takeoff. I hope so. As the plane lifted off the runway, Claire let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle. She hadn't planned for any of this to happen. She never wanted to be the kind of person who pulled rank just to prove a point, but some lessons had to be taught the hard way. The flight attendant kept her distance now, avoiding eye contact, her earlier confidence completely shattered. The businessman beside Claire still looked amused, shaking his head every now and then, as if replaying the whole scene in his mind. Across the aisle, a woman who had been watching from the start gave Claire a small nod of approval. Claire didn't need their validation, but she appreciated it. After a while, Michael, the supervisor, returned, looking as tense as ever. Ms. Reynolds, he said, carefully measured. I wanted to personally apologize again on behalf of the airline. This isn't how we want our customers to be treated, and I take full responsibility for what happened. Claire studied him for a moment, then nodded. Thank you for saying that. He hesitated before continuing. I've already started gathering reports on past incidents. I'll make sure this gets handled appropriately. Claire nodded again, her tone softer this time. Good, because it's not just about me. This could have happened to anyone. Michael looked genuinely ashamed, giving her a final nod before stepping away. The businessman leaned toward Claire. You know, I've flown with this airline for years, and I don't think I've ever seen someone hold them accountable like that. Claire smiled faintly. Then maybe it's time for a change. The rest of the flight passed quietly. The tension from earlier faded, replaced by a strange mix of awkwardness and admiration. People snuck glances at Claire, some with curiosity, others with newfound respect. The flight attendant, to her credit, eventually returned with a glass of water and a trembling, "Can I get you anything else, Ms. Reynolds?" Claire simply shook her head. "I'm fine, thank you." It wasn't about humiliating anyone. It was about making sure no one else had to go through what she did. As the plane landed and passengers began gathering their belongings, Claire stood, adjusting her bag over her shoulder. The businessman chuckled one last time. "I gotta say, this was the most entertaining flight I've ever been on." Claire laughed softly. "Glad I could make it memorable." As she stepped off the plane, feeling the cool airport air hit her face, she knew one thing for sure. This wouldn't be the last time she made sure people in power actually did the right thing. And if her presence alone could make someone think twice before judging a person by their appearance, then that was a win.